U.S. President Donald Trump has announced an extension of the ceasefire with Iran hours before it was due to expire. He says the move is to give more time to what he called the fractured Iranian government to come up with a unified proposal.
Until then, American forces will remain on standby and continue their blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Meantime, peace talks between Washington and Tehran appear to be on hold, with the White House confirming that Vice President J.D. Vance has cancelled his trip to Islamabad.
Iran, in response, insists the ceasefire extension is a, quote, ploy to buy time for a surprise strike, saying it's time to consider a military response. It's unclear when the next round of peace talks will take place. For more, let's speak now to Barbara Slavin. She's a Distinguished Fellow for Middle East and North Africa at the Stimson Center. Thank you so much for joining us, Barbara. So just days ago, we heard President Trump suggesting a ceasefire extension is highly unlikely, but here we are. What do you think changed his calculation?
Yeah, well, it's Taco Tuesday here still in the United States. I know it's already Wednesday in Asia. I don't think Donald Trump wants to begin bombing Iran again, because if that happens, then the ceasefire in Lebanon completely breaks down. Iran could start striking oil installations and so on in its Arab neighbors and make a bad situation even worse. The problem is that we still don't have a coherent negotiating path. The U.S. has put down a series of very maximalist demands, which Iran has rejected. Iran has not come back with a counteroffer at this point. We've gone from bombing to siege. You know, the Iranians initially blocking traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, and now the United States blockading the blockade. And the thought, I think, among some is that the pressure of the blockade, U.S. blockade on Iran, will put pressure on the Iranians eventually to come back to the table. But I'm not so sure.
So what exactly is President Trump getting wrong about Iran? I mean, as you were saying, he's used a mixture of threats. He's talked about success and, you know, he's made friendlier comments about the so-called new regime. Nothing seems to have worked so far. So what is it exactly about Iran that's different from, I guess, other people that President Trump has faced before and has, I guess, prevailed over before?
Yeah, well, his record is pretty spotty in terms of prevailing. He doesn't always prevail. He has gotten Iran wrong since it's his first administration, when he pulled out of a nuclear deal that was working. Because it was Obama's deal. He called it the worst deal ever negotiated, but it was because it was Obama's achievement. He was not able to replace it with anything in his first term, and so far, he's not able to replace it with anything in his second term. He underestimated the strength of the Iranian regime. He was convinced by Bibi Netanyahu that eliminating the top leadership would either cause regime change, real regime change, not what we've seen, or would weaken the government so much that it would sue for peace and make enormous concessions. And of course, that hasn't happened. The Iranians were prepared for these attacks, and they have certainly exacted tremendous pain on the international economy, on their neighbors, you know, in response. So he has been misled, or he made the wrong assumptions, or he didn't listen to proper advice, whatever you want to say. He certainly has not thought this through. And now he's scrambling because he doesn't want full-scale war. He knows what that would do to the markets, to oil prices, to the Republicans' chances in our November midterm elections. But he doesn't want to look like he's lost. And it's very, very difficult. The Iranians are not going to make this easy for him. I mean, this is the second time the United States and Israel have attacked Iran during negotiations.
Right. You touched on Iran's leadership, Deborah. So Mr. Trump describing it as seriously fractured and lacking a unified position. If that's the case, who has Washington been engaging with? And are they the people who can deliver a deal at the end?
Yeah, I don't think it's a fractured leadership. I think there are obviously different tendencies, more hardline, but it is a leadership that is unified in defying the United States, in trying to make sure that if there is any agreement, it's favorable to Iran. And we've seen some indications of what the Iranians are looking for. They continue to insist that they have a right to enrich uranium on their own soil, even if they're willing to suspend that enrichment for a period of time. They are refusing to hand over a stockpile of highly enriched uranium to the United States. They want sanctions relief. They want their frozen assets unfrozen. They have quite a long list of demands. They want guarantees that they're not going to be attacked again by the United States and Israel. So we do have some indications of what they're looking for, but the U.S. position, at least as we understand it so far, is much, much more maximalist, and the Iranians think they can hold out a little bit longer.
Okay, I want to pick up on that particular point, the U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, clearly an attempt to, impose economic pressure on Iran, which we know is already under severe sanctions. So I'm wondering, what's the story? What's the history, if you like, in terms of economic pressure on Iran? Has it ever worked?
Well, to my mind, it worked once, and that was in the run-up to the 2015 nuclear deal. But that's because the sanctions were multilateral. They were supported by UN Security Council resolutions. Even the Chinese, the Russians were pretty stringent during that period of time. And there was a defined objective, namely a nuclear deal, under which Iran was able to enrich uranium, albeit in small amounts, and under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency. So that's the one time I think sanctions have worked with Iran. Otherwise, all that they have done is impoverish the Iranian people and strengthened the elite, which has access to the limited hard currency, and of course benefits from smuggling and crypto and all the other ways in which they manage to monopolize scarce resources. Under Trump, maximum pressure has been a colossal failure.
Okay. Barbara, so unlike previous extensions, there is no clear ceasefire deadline at this time until Iran presents a proposal first. So is that realistic expectation, or does it risk dragging things out? How do you expect Iran will react this time?
Well, I think an undefined, indefinite ceasefire is better than what we've seen from Trump so far, where he sets deadlines and then at the last minute he reverses them. This is much more realistic, and it's also an effort, I think, to calm tensions a little bit. A lot will depend on how stringently the United States enforces this blockade. There have been some reports of tankers that have gotten out. Will they stop every ship? So far, there's only been one Iranian cargo ship that was boarded, as far as I know, and it apparently had some dual-use items on it. So the U.S. can tighten it or loosen it, depending. And of course, we'll have to see what the price of oil is. It seems that $100 a barrel is the sore spot for Trump. When it goes over $100 a barrel, he tries to de-escalate tensions. So I'm not sure what the prices are in Asia this morning for you, but that does seem to be part of his strategy, and I think he does understand that it's like the boy who cried wolf. I mean, how many times can you set deadlines and then ignore them?
Just under $100 a barrel is where it is this morning. Barbara, we leave it there. Thank you so much for talking to us, as always. Barbara Slavin is Distinguished Fellow for Middle East and North Africa at the Stimson Center